This is the Drop the Clutch podcast, a fan-run podcast full of guests, controversy, and opinions about the sport we love that sometimes drives us insane. Hey everyone, welcome back to the last episode of Drop the Clutch Season 1. This is the AGM Special. Today, I'm joined by regular co-host Frankie. Hi Frankie, you right?
Hello. Yeah, kind of, maybe.
Should we
Read through this crap.
jump straight in? Let's go.
We'll read through this and decide whether I'm still all right at the end of it.
Okay.
So, I have a statement to my side. I have my
Yeah.
thoughts next to it. And I'm going to drill a hole through my head trying to make sense of all this crap. So, we begin, the three-league structure remains, which is a surprise to basically no one. Unless, I don't know, you frequent the British Speedway Forum, who seem to think that return to the British League is a good idea.
No.
There's still too much doubling up for that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So resumption of the Premiership, Championship, National League system. New rule for Premiership clubs regarding youth riders. The selection between either competing in the National League, the new National Individual Series, or a youth program as second halves. On paper, it's a good idea. The second half idea was what I suggested previously, but the giving the option of that plus a new series plus the National League is butchering it completely. You consider that we will in the Premiership at least we'll already have two clubs competing in the National League as well as the Premiership. That leaves 5 others to decide between those 3. You're not. You may struggle for second halves or for this National Individual Series meetings. In time, I would prefer it if they just said no, a new youth program that complements the National League, sort of like what our existing junior leagues did. I don't really know what's going on with them at the moment.
Well, they basically got decimated when the BSBA brought in that rule about no nomad clubs.
Yeah. I'm not entirely sure why. They had no problems with Cradley Heath competing in the National League at Wolverhampton for years. I don't know.
Milton Keynes had a development team that rode at Perry Bar.
Yeah, and Reading previously rode at Eastbourne and moved to Swindon. Like, who cares? If the staging promotion's happy for it, then just let them race.
Well, yeah.
So I think as a youth system, any one of those 3 is good, some better than others. I think, though, that making them also compete in the National League is probably the worst of both worlds. The National League is a professional league. It's not really grassroots, as some people seem to say it is. You want something that complements it, that provides a better feeder for new riders to join the National League, rather than for National League riders to join the Championship. So I would personally prefer the youth program, but we'll have to see what other clubs decide. Clubs besides Bellevue and Oxford, which, as far as we know, already run a National League club.
I imagine Leicester might as well, because they already have a National League club.
Yeah. But then, and then you end up with either a ridiculously bloated National League or too much division between what the Premiership promotions are doing.
Yeah.
I think it's not clear to me whether this applies to the Championship as well. It doesn't. It reads as though it would, but it feels unwise to me.
Will be available. Yeah, it doesn't say. Oh, yeah, it does say all Premiership and Championship clubs have signed up to a new 3-tier structure. Following discussions at the AGM include each club either competing in the National Development League or staging events in a new national individual series or taking part in a youth programme to be run in second half following senior meeting.
Yeah,
And it's compulsory for each club to take one of the options.
yeah, that's to me that's not massively clear if that includes the championship. It reads like it might, but
It reads a bit like it does, to be fair.
yeah, I don't know. That just
The
part of me would
second bit
prefer it.
underneath says 6 clubs have already stated their intention to take part in the NDL next season.
Yep, the majority of them will also be raiding the championship anyway, at least. Either championship or the Premiership. Senior leagues, Birmingham and Oxford joining the Premiership. Oxford now are doing the triple. They're also racing the championship for the National League. We'll see how well that goes.
Yeah.
As far as I'm aware, it's never been done before. That Oxford financially probably the only club that could do that.
Yeah, true.
There's a lot of financial backers behind the racing at Cowley Stadium, which that cannot be said for other clubs. Which is why I don't think clubs like Birmingham, potentially even Kings Lynn or Ipswich, I don't think they'll take the National League in this new youth division.
Would you,
I don't
at
think.
Birmingham, they'll carry on with the second halves that they do already? Because
Yeah,
they've only got a Monday night available, so they won't be able to do NDL racing.
is that why they moved up to the Premiership then, for Monday night racing?
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, I don't. There are some clubs that I don't think they can afford. The promotions don't think they can afford to run in the National League as well.
No.
Like, I do think in the case of Bellevue and Oxford, their situation is unique, and that they can.
Yeah.
On the point of financial and stadium issues, Peterborough and Wolverhampton, the loss is big.
Huge.
I'm slightly pessimistic about their return. I know they're both very, they're old clubs. They've been around for a very long time. But I think they'll struggle to find a new location for a stadium.
Mm.
I'd be interested to see if they can come up with anything, but I don't believe it when I see it.
Apparently, there's stuff going on behind the scenes at both clubs, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, we'll find out.
I'm
New
going to take
ownership.
a slightly more positive route on that.
Well, yeah, new positive route. Leicester under new ownership. Okay then.
Okay, good for them.
Now, this one's an interesting one. The points limit for the SGB Premiership is now at 46 riders.
Mm-hmm.
In truth, for a 7-rider squad, that's as high as it was ever going to go. Without including the Rising Star. There's probably an argument to include the Rising Star in the points limit. There's also an argument not to. I'm happy enough with 40 points for 6 riders. Compare that to 2019, the last season when the points limit included the 7th rider, 42.5, allows you on 2019 2.5 points for a Rising Star. Most clubs will go for 3, maybe even a 4-point Rising Star, which gives them a considerable advantage because then they're not counted, so you build to a higher point limit effectively. Yeah. I do still think there's enough Rising Stars, however, for both reserve positions to be Rising Stars. I don't really see why that's not the case this season.
That is a valid point because, like you say, there is plenty of British riders out there.
Yeah.
That need team spots.
Yeah, there's no reason why both reserves cannot be from the Rising Star program. As far as I don't see why they didn't mandate that. Unchanged league and knockout cup formats. Playoff format is unchanged as well. It's all fair enough, so long as we're mindful not to overcrowd the calendar again.
Well, yeah.
And they've lifted the restrictions on the extra league riders who can be signed by any club. not entirely sure why that restriction was there in the first place. They probably thought that in the same vein, when they introduced, I think it's back in 2018, they introduced a cap on the number of 8-point riders in the Premiership. I think it came from roughly the same place to prevent people from signing too many high-class riders from one team, but it ended up downgrading the quality of the league. So I think removing that has come from the same place. But that's fine. 7 clubs in the Premiership: Bellevue, Birmingham, Ipswich, Kings Lynn, Leicester, Oxford, and Sheffield. No complaints to that. Team building has already begun, so we can discuss that too. We move on to the Championship because that's where we're on. Unless you've got anything to say.
No, not really. I've heard positive things from Birmingham's side so far, so I suppose I wait with bated breath just to see. Although I've definitely said that I'm being a neutral when Birmingham and Bellevue ride against each other next season.
Yeah,
Nobody's changing my mind on that.
fair enough. Workington coming back to the Championship, considering they disappeared for a while. I'm actually quite surprised to see them back this soon. Oxford confirmed to continue in the Championship as well. However, the points limit for 7 riders is 38. That is too low.
It is. I completely agree.
That is too low. They've set it that low, and I'm saying this is speculation, but I think they've set it that low because they want to squeeze out the number of 5, 6, and 7-point riders who, instead of progressing up to the Premiership, either chug along at Championship level or were once world class and have since dropped down and just chug along at the Championship level. But it's not going to resolve that. The issue there is not the points. The issue there is doubling up. I think they would have done better to limit the number of riders who could double up in the Championship rather than dropping the points limit.
Yeah.
The way they have. I would prefer it if the points limit was, as it was in 2019, 42.5. Knockout Cup, the BSN series to continue. The BSN series has no reason to exist, in my opinion. It's just the same competition yet again.
The player format's been changed.
Yep. But yeah, the BSN series has got no reason to exist compared to, you've got league structure, you've got knockout cup structure, both are different formats. They ride differently. You treat them differently as a competitor. BSN series is basically just a pooled league. There's no real change. They have now
rationalized. Will win something.
Yeah, they've rationalised the Championship playoff format from the crackpot that they had last season.
Yeah.
With 9 clubs in the Championship, 4 to go into the semi-finals is fine. 6 to the quarterfinals was probably too many for that size of league.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what they were thinking last season. I don't know where that format came from. We say 9 clubs in the Championship: Berwick, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Oxford, Plymouth, Poole, Redcar, Scunthorpe, and Workington. No,
quite a north-based league with lost my train of thought. It's quite a northern-based league with the exception of Oxford, Plymouth, and Poole.
Yeah, it is. That's always the weird thing. A lot of British clubs have worked. A lot of British clubs existed in the Midlands and the North, and certainly do now, rather than in the south of England. And I think that's, I dare say that's a matter of economics.
Yeah.
If you consider what is and what isn't popular in the North, you think like rugby union versus rugby league. Rugby union is a much more prestigious sport, whereas rugby league is much more working class. Like I said, it's just economics. Load of
lot
crap.
more working class people up north in comparison to down south.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Load of crap from Rob Godfrey about youth development being key, which is why they've only decided to start doing it now.
Yep. Same old, same old.
Yeah, he does admit that one of the reasons for bringing down the championship points limit was to bring the youth through, but like I said, it won't work.
Yeah.
The issue is not the points limit. The issue is the riders either who go up to the championship and don't progress further, or come down from the Premiership to the championship on a 5-point average and just sit there.
Yeah.
In that instance, he's got his eye on the wrong thing.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. The new system for youth development will involve every club.
It will involve every club.
Yeah, with the enthusiasm shown by everyone as we head in this direction. It's only taken you, what, 4 years to realise this? Or is it longer?
All this being said, I remember in 2021, there was discussions of Premiership Junior League. There were exactly 2 articles on the BSPA website about that. None of them had meeting results.
Nope.
So I'll believe this one I see.
Yeah.
I think the Premiership Junior League was it was akin to the second half idea, but it just never got off the ground for some reason. More other crap about returns, whatever, and then we have, of course, any other matters at the BSPA series. At the AGM, sorry. Premiership CEO Phil Morris resumes his role. What exactly he does is still unclear. From what I can tell on the TV, he seems to be the media face of SGB Premiership. He seems to emulate his role as FIM race director on televised fixtures. Why, I'm not really sure.
Who knows?
If he could start to improve the pace of meetings, then yeah, by all means, he should be there. But I think he's in too much with Eurosport in trying to keep the pace of meetings fixed to ensure that they can get interviews in, that there's enough time for replays, even though there's no reason why you can't have the 2 minutes on while you're watching the replay anyway. But whatever.
Well, yeah, there is that argument because the replays are like 30 seconds.
Yeah. There's no reason to wait to put the 2 minutes on until after the replays are finished. There really isn't. And as I say, if we're going into this idea of having second half youth fixtures at the back end of meeting televised on Eurosport, you're going to have to pick up the pace of the meeting. 15 heats, you shouldn't be running anywhere close to a 10 p.m. curfew.
No. You should be finished by 9:15.
At the latest, really, with no stoppages at least. You speak to someone like my dad, who's watching Speedway in the 70s, 80s, even into the 90s. He'll tell you the 13 heat formats plus the second half, you'd be done by about 10:15.
We can do that at Birmingham most of the time. Bar a massive accident, we've had 21 races in by 10 o'clock.
Yeah. In the case of my dad, it was even more the case when Frank Ebden was refereeing. There's a name most people won't remember.
Yeah.
The upshot of Frank Ebden is once the first rider, the way my dad describes him is that once the tapes have gone up for one heat, he puts 2 minutes on for the next heat.
Wow. Yeah, that is fast.
I mean, to be fair, at least the meetings are finished by about 8:30.
Yeah.
So,
has one absent rider in the top 5. They will now have the option to use a guest or rider replacement in any position. Oh, am I? Oh.
We haven't done electronic starts yet.
Shit.
They have introduced the FIM's. I think the FIM call it the orange box system. It's just random electronic starting procedure that they have in basically every other sport, which I'm fine with, frankly. It makes it a bit more entertaining, but I do think that particularly March and April, as riders get used to it, you will see more riders going through the tapes.
Yeah, more exclusions.
The problem, this has been a problem in league racing for a while now. The starts are too quick. It's supposed to be 1.5 seconds between the green light and the tapes, but frequently it's a lot shorter than that, and it really depends on what referee you get. But with an electronic system, you can force a minimum delay, which means that I think particularly for sort of young riders who think like reserves in both the Championship and the Premiership, as well as National League riders, maybe may see a referee's name and expect a faster start, they will go through the test.
Yeah.
I fully expect it. I fully expect it. I personally think, however, there's little wrong with the tape mechanism as it is at the moment. I know some people in the past have suggested like using lasers or whatever, using transponders to determine if someone's moving. Lasers won't work because anyone who suggests using a laser doesn't understand how light works. And the transponders are. I've seen the statistics that come out from the Extra Liga around the reaction times on the start line. They very rarely catch when a rider has jumped the start. I've seen a negative reaction time exactly once. So I don't agree with either. I'm perfectly fine with the tapes as they are, but I do say that referees should be more hotter on stopping races because riders have moved. Particularly if we're maintaining this whole warning system as well, because that just introduces inconsistency. So suddenly you end up with one rider who rolls, penalises themselves, the referee lets it go, but they get a warning. Another rider, already on a warning, rolls, the referee can't let it go because he has to throw him out.
Yeah.
It introduces inconsistency. But yeah, I've no problem with the electronic system itself, so long as it's programmed right. If we end up with 10, 15-second pauses on the start line, then get rid of it. Take it back, reprogram it, and try again next season.
Yeah.
And then we move on to where you were going, facilities.
Where one club has an absent rider in their top 5, they now have the option to use a guest or rider replacement in any of those positions. Previously, one absent rider, 4th or 5th in the team order, had to be covered by rider replacement. Basically, our friend Nick would say what screwed Bellevue over in the playoffs.
Yes, and this is where my neutral head comes in. Because, okay, so firstly, I have no problem with rider replacements being required at 4 and 5 by 5 match average. The very simple reason is that increases the number of rides that a reserve rider will get in a meeting. Simply because you can't use another rider to replace them. For 4th by a CMA, at least one reserve will get a ride. But 5th, both reserves will get a ride. Very simple. It just increases the number of rides for the younger riders. So I didn't necessarily have a problem with it from that. I have a problem with Bellevue's complaining about it simply because, much like the year before with Sheffield, Ipswich, some others as well, when Bellevue signed Robert Lambert, they agreed to the rules ahead of time. They knew what the rules were. So why are you complaining now when it matters, or when it affects you directly, rather than complaining when you could change it?
True.
So I think the only good thing this rule change has, in my opinion, is that it simplifies facilities. It makes them easier to understand, and easier to determine who can do what. I think the only thing now is that does this make an unexpected change?
No.
I think it does. I think it allows ride replacement if you've only got your number 1 missing. Previously, that had to be guessed. Unless I'm mistaken. I'm gonna dig up the rule book now.
This one baffles me a little bit.
Well, they do. The rule book is 180 pages. So
how?
Because they decided to print it off on what looks like A6. Let's have a
The
look.
next one baffles me a little bit. Heat 15. Any rider in the team is now eligible for Heat 15.
I am mistaken. It's an old rule that meant it had to be a guest at number 1. It is rider replacement as well. That's fine. Anyway, you were talking about what, P15?
Yeah. Any rider in the team now being eligible for Heat 15, regardless of points scored to that stage or the position in the team. I think that's a bit weird, personally.
Heat 15 is supposed to be the top rider heat. Why?
Exactly.
Why?
Yeah, because you're going to stick your number 7 out that scored 0 points.
I mean, they're not going to do that, but
Yeah, I
again,
know. I was being pedantic.
the only benefit this has is simplifying the rulebook. But it wasn't that complicated anyway. If I recall, it was the top 5 by match average and the top 3 by points scored in program rights.
Mm.
It wasn't that difficult. I think they overcomplicated it slightly by only including programmed rights, which meant that if a reserve scored 10 points but had 3 reserve switches in them, they couldn't take part in Heat 15.
Yeah.
But again, like if you're going to make this kind of change, just get rid of the nominated heat. That's such a really stupid change.
Yeah. Well, it makes no sense to me.
I mean, it's bad enough having the top 5 by match average automatically eligible anyway, because then it's not a top scorers heat. I'd much prefer it if it was like the top 3 by match average plus the top 3 by points scored in a meeting. Because that then restricts it to say your top 3 riders plus anyone further down who top scored in the evening.
Yeah.
I like it. Unlike facilities, that was never complicated.
No.
So I don't fully know why they've done that. It's strange. But they've done it. We'll see how it goes. As I say, I don't imagine there will be much change. Teams will still put their top riders in Heat 15, even if reserves are automatically eligible. So long as this doesn't result in an edge case that happened in 2016, sorry, when rider excluded for delaying the start or on 2 minutes was replaced by another eligible rider and not a reserve. So long as that doesn't happen, fine.
True.
8-day rule for guests. It will not apply during the playoffs. The 8-day rule is very strange. Because
The 8-day rule is dumb because it only applies to the 2 to 7. It doesn't apply to the number 1.
For reasons, but I'm going to put the rulebook again just to make sure I haven't misread this. So as I recall, the 8-day rule applies for the track, not for the team.
Yeah.
Which means that, yeah, a rider may guest in an official meeting at a track only once in an 8-day period within that league. So it just makes it really difficult to understand it, because suddenly if an away side, say, let's say, I don't know, Kings Lynn are riding at Bellevue, and Kings Lynn take Jack Holder as a guest, just as an example. That means that Bellevue cannot have Jack Holder guest at home for the next 8 days.
That's dumb.
But that's how it's worded. It would make more sense if it was to say that a rider can only guest once per club in an 8-day period.
Yeah.
But having it once per track creates a situation where one team can prevent another team from using a guest at their own track in 8 days.
I suppose if they were good round that track the previous week, it goes well. You can't use them because they were good last week, and you'll beat us more than likely if you have said rider in said team.
Yeah. The other big exception, of course, is double headers, but that's only because it counts as one meeting for the guest rule. That's fine. That being said, and this is going to be controversial, there should be a hard limit on how many guest meetings any individual rider can do in a season.
I could agree to that.
That would make strategizing for a rider, for a club, very, very interesting, especially as we go into the playoffs. Suddenly now you don't want to sign top riders in the early part of the season. You want to save them for later, or do you gamble on signing higher riders earlier when other clubs aren't? That would make it very, very interesting. I think that it all links into this idea of trying to get rid of guests in general. I would much prefer it if we switched to a squad system rather than just having guests all over the place.
There's money though, isn't it?
No, but you always see it on social media. Guests in like Premiership final or whatever. people complaining they got a medal, they're not part of that team, they're only a guest, why did they get a medal, all that usual crap.
It's money though, because the rider will want paying even if they're not riding.
Oh yeah, of course.
Which, to be honest, makes me say, oh well, you can have another club as well. Go ride for them.
And this is where we get into doubling up.
Yeah, I meant like abroad. So if they've got like a Polish team or something, because Polish teams operate squad systems, and it seems to go fairly well.
It does when they get a ride.
True.
And I mean that's the big problem with the squad system. Some riders don't get a ride, but you know that's kind of how a squad system works. Transfer window is now relative to the club. I don't like that. Especially as it's limited to regular league matches. Suddenly the knockout cup does not count towards this. I don't understand why. I'd never had a problem with the hard deadline transfer window. It made it very clear for clubs and fans alike to understand when it was a team could name new riders in the side and when they couldn't. And I think the fixed deadline also created an incentive for clubs to do as many meetings as they could before that deadline so that they get as good a feel as possible for how their side was going into the playoffs. Having it as a relative to the number of fixtures held in the league only removes that incentive. If anything, it actually creates a perverse incentive in the other direction, with more clubs putting more fixtures in August and September, trying to make it so that they can make changes while their competitors can't.
Yeah.
I really don't like that. I would much prefer it, not only if it remained at the end of August, but if they moved it forward 2 weeks, create an even bigger incentive for the league structure to be winding down towards the end of August. So that we could get the playoffs done, or at very least started by mid-September, as has been the plan for years now.
Yeah. But it's never worked.
No, the playoffs have always been pushed back. Certainly in the last few years.
Blame British weather.
Well, no, blame the clubs for basically. Well, they schedule all these off days during the season for rained off fixtures. They have a fixture rained off in May. They reschedule it for the end of August.
Why?
I don't know. Then of course testimonials, the usual testimonial. I don't
Thomas
care.
Jorgensen, Carl Newman, Charles Wright, and Cole Howarth.
Yeah, I don't care much for testimonials. I don't.
One at Kings Lynn, one at Poole, one at Redcar, one at Sheffield. Basically.
That's all fair enough. And then of course fixtures will come soon enough.
Yay! Well, that was exciting. So, what do you think overall?
I think a lot of this is there's always a difference between what's agreed at the AGM and then what comes out in the rule book that's later published.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of this, you will have to refer to the rule book to see what actually is the case and what isn't. Things that are explicitly defined here, like the points limit, guests, the 8-day rule for guests, the transfer window, they'll all be set in stone in the rule book. But some other things, maybe for instance, like the 8-day rule for guests and Heat 15, and that they may change a few things coming in the rule book. You do have to refer back to the rule book to see what is and what isn't the case.
Yeah.
Beforehand, and obviously the rule book being as bloated as it is, they may introduce something very, very strange into the rule book that wasn't mentioned here. In 2018, they did exactly that.
Yeah, that always seems to happen.
2018 was particularly egregious. They added a rule that said that riders must remain astride on their bikes at the start line. Basically means you had to remain mounted on your bike at the start line. If you didn't, you were excluded. They repealed that.
Yes, I vaguely remember that. We're seeing several riders get off their bike to start gardening, and then they'd be chucked out of a race.
Yeah.
That caused some real uproar, and then it got removed a few weeks later, if I remember correctly.
That's fucking stupid.
Yeah.
4 riders thrown out from one meeting at Bellevue. Like, I don't know where that rule came from, but like I said, that kind of thing. There are always these very small technical changes to the rule book that aren't mentioned in an AGM statement. They may not even have been talked about in the AGM because they'll go through. It's not a BSK thing. They'll go through the Speedway Control Board or the Autocycle Union. They'll say you need to insert this clause. You'll need to insert that clause. You need to change this clause or that clause or whatever.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things will come out later when the rulebook's published, maybe late February or early March. But there's things here, as I've said, that I agree with. There's some things that I don't agree with. There are some things I haven't said.
Through not wanting to piss anybody like totally off and
Not
make
really,
them not listen to the podcast saying.
Because I'd just be here all night, honestly.
Yeah.
Like I said, I do think I think some effort has to be made to cut back the calendar. I still think that, and I don't care what the fixture list will be like next season. It's going to be overbloated anyway, especially because they're not making any effort to cut out unnecessary competitions like the BSN series.
We only brought it in last season. It's got to have at least 2 seasons before it disappears into non-existence. This is how the BSPA work.
The BSPA, the Premiership Supporters Club only had 1 season, but that's probably more interesting than the thing that came before it.
Oh yeah, because the fans would vote. If I remember correctly, the fans would vote on Twitter to see which riders they wanted to see in certain races.
That was the only downside to it.
How is that a downside?
The fact that it was locked down to social media platforms and that no club ran a poll on their website.
Yeah. Okay, I can see.
That's how it should have been done. It shouldn't have been a Twitter poll or anything like that because
it wasn't thought through properly because oh no, we've got to actually, to make it fair, we've got to actually embed another thing into the club website, blah 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 blah, and all that sort of stuff. It costs money, so it never actually actuated.
And half the club websites don't even have a mobile view. So
the Birmingham one does, but it's not great.
Yeah, like the Premiership Supporters Club only had 1 season. It was actually okay besides that biggest issue. The big thing for me was that it used a 13 heat format. But that's the subjective thing. A different format means a different competition. And this time you're not changing the league structure, you're changing the tactics within the meeting. It shouldn't have made it very interesting to think tactically. Like sometimes you'd say okay, you'll tack sub in heats. I think they're decent enough heat to tack sub in heat 6 because it's 3 and 4. So I think is it 5 and 6 for the away or something like that. You can't do that in the 13 heat format because it's a different set of riders.
Here you go. The mobile view for the Birmingham website.
I mean, it's better than the mobile view for Swindon.
But when you look on the desktop site, let me just take the mobile bit out. I don't know if it will refresh if I take the mobile bit out. No, hang on. When you consider that that's the site itself,
yeah,
it looks a bit like drab in comparison because there's a carousel at the top with the moving pictures and news headlines and stuff, but with the mobile version you don't get that.
Yeah,
and then you can see all the sponsors and stuff on the desktop version.
Yeah, I think what we should do is give some honourable mentions to things that weren't said in the AGM this season.
Although, to be honest, that might just be me being picky.
Yeah, maybe. Super heats still exist. remain the same as they were, as far as I know. Fine. I don't like them either. I prefer two-rider runoff. There is no movement to simplify the league tables as they are. They have it. After simplifying the way league scoring was done, they successfully overcomplicated the table beyond where it was before, and there's no boost to simplify that. Other things, I was trying to think. Other things as well. There's no changes to things like the 5% boost for guests on home meetings, or the 2.5% reduction for British riders previously or currently NDL eligible. No changes there. There's no change, as far as we know, to the meeting format in any leagues, although we're yet to know for this new youth system what the format will be. I'm guessing, because second half, it will be the 6-heat format from the Midland and Southern Development League, or the Northern
I'm
Team.
assuming that would be the case. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes the most sense. As far as we know, there were no mentions, or have been no mentions in the AGM around other technical changes, such as the use of a race director at meetings, similar to what the FIM uses, or an increase in, I don't know, medical provision at meetings. Whether that's needed or not is entirely up to you.
Well, I openly say that having 2 ambulances and 2 doctors at meetings is ideal anyway, because 1, you've then got another ambulance so you can carry on racing, and 2, you don't have to wait for an NHS one because they can take upwards of like 6 hours.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a fair argument there.
Because I vaguely remember, was it 2022 when Josh Orty crashed into the kickboards on the 4th bend at Birmingham? There was we only had 1 ambulance at the time, and the meeting had to be abandoned because the closest ambulance was 6 hours because it was still waiting in line to get in at A&E, and Josh Orty ended up going to hospital in a car on the back seat with a badly broken leg because of this.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I openly agree that having 2 ambulances and 2 doctors at meetings is a good idea.
Yeah.
That's just my view.
Yeah. No other changes to the absent ride replacement or injury ride replacement rules. They remain the same as far as we know. Guests for the Rising Star as well, I presume, are the same. Tax subs, also no change, although I think, as far as I'm aware, they don't apply to the Knockout Cup.
No, we'll have to wait until the rulebook comes out to fully go over the technical bits.
Well, the thing is, in the existing rulebook from last season, tax subs is not applicable in a 2-legged tie, but every league fixture is a 2-legged tie.
Oh, how have I not realised that before now?
Yep. I love spotting these minor technical changes that no one else catches.
I'm just dumb, clearly.
No, I don't. To be fair, I don't think the SCB spotted that one either.
No, probably not.
We're talking about them simplifying the rules for facilities and Heat 15. They could have simplified the rules around what's known as a frustrated ride.
Go on.
A frustrated ride. If you get a rider excluded for a starting offence, so exceeding minutes or touching the tapes, delaying the start, the usual kind of thing, that's called a frustrated ride if they are replaced by a reserve. A frustrated ride does not count towards the minimum number of rides, 3, but it does count towards the maximum. 7.
Yeah. Okay. That's a bit weird, isn't it?
But it's really difficult to understand that, because a frustrated ride only applies for a starting offence where a rider is replaced. If a rider is off 15 meters or is not replaced at all, it's known as a compulsory ride, which counts towards the minimum ride rule. Which is why if you get a rider excluded twice for a starting offence, you can only replace them once if they haven't had 3 rides.
Okay.
But it's really not easy to understand. The rule itself covers about a page, and it does just sort of spin around in circles a little bit.
That's interesting.
Like I said, that's the sort of thing that they could have simplified, but they didn't. Premiership leagues, as far as we know, heats 2 and 8 are still protected for the Rising Star rider. No replacements allowed unless it's an injury rider replacement, which is fine.
Yep.
Which we presume as well then that tactical subs are still banned in Heat 8, which makes sense equally. I'm assuming there's no changes to the eligibility criteria for the National League as well. I think it is still controversial as to whether Commonwealth riders should be included in the National League, because that changed last year.
Well, they could, if they'd been in Britain long enough and they had a British passport, they could get in anyway. But
yeah,
so it sort of just opens it up straight away. I don't know. It's a bit of an interesting one. I sort of agree with it and not at the same time, just because if an Aussie rider was over here for long enough to obtain residency and a British passport, then they would end up riding in the NDL anyway, if they wanted to. But I don't know. It's sort of a funny one, personally.
Yeah. I think what's the biggest thing that's been missed from this AGM statement, in my opinion? Just skimming through the rulebook now to spot it. There is no mention of league pairs or individuals at all.
Yeah.
I presume that they're still doing them next season, but to what format? Are they going to try and resurrect the touring idea of the Premiership, where you go around each club? It's just going to be a one-off meeting. Who knows?
I'd prefer a one-off meeting.
Yeah, but on a neutral track, or
yeah,
like
on a championship track rather than a Premiership one. Although with doubling up, it wouldn't really be neutral anyway, would it? So I suppose that bit doesn't matter.
Neutral for the riders, maybe not so for the club. Or maybe just host them all at Oxford. There we go. That's sorted.
No.
I mean, why not? It's the closest we've got to a neutral track. Every rider races at it.
Not a fan, personally. I'm going to anger Oxford fans. Not a fan.
Fair enough. Of course, I'm presuming other British major events, the dates and venues for those will be confirmed in due course. It's not going to be now, it never is. Beyond that,
between now and next Christmas.
Yes, probably.
And that's Christmas 25, not Christmas 2024.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's, as far as I'm aware, that's everything from the AGM. What the good, the bad, the ugly, and the completely missed off.
That's a good way of putting it. That's a very good way of putting it. This thing that's come out today about the race night media and the fans' voice representative.
Oh, was that thing from Bellevue?
It's league-wide, apparently, because someone's appeared on the Birmingham page about it.
Yeah. School council. Anyone remember that? It's a way of giving students a voice while completely dismissing them and then them never meeting again for 6 months until you elect new representatives at the start of the year.
Let me read this. Yeah. Supporters of all 7 Sports Insured Premiership clubs are being given the opportunity to have a say in the league's future and to get involved in race night media operations. As part of a league-wide initiative launched by Premiership CEO Phil Morris, each club will be appointing a fans' voice representative and a social media ambassador. The fans' voice representative will have the chance to join Zoom meetings hosted by Morris to discuss the status of the league as a whole with their fellow club representatives, and specifically ways in which the race night experience for supporters can be enhanced. Meanwhile, the social media ambassador is a newly created race night role which will involve working alongside the club's existing social media team, as well as that of the BSPL. The role is primarily designed at content creation, therefore working knowledge of social media platforms, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, etc. would be preferable, although training will be given. Again, what Gen Z doesn't know how to use social media, this would be a role requiring access to pits and centre green during home meetings, and the successful applicant would need to be able to provide content at speed. Blah, blah, interested, blah, blah, email this, blah, blah, yeah. Okay. Again, basically just a third wheel. I don't get the point of it personally.
I think it is this idea of giving fans a voice in the way the league is run. But if they wanted to give fans a voice, they could just send someone into the British Speedway forum every now and again.
Well, yeah.
I mean, it's a toxic hellscape, that site, but, at least you get
Which
raw
is why
opinions.
I avoid it like the plague, but,
I mean, I like to dive in there whenever there's major controversy going on, like when Smarship was thrown out of Voytons, but,
Was that a fun evening, was it? Fun way to spend
spent
an
hours
evening.
reading through the rule book and say, hang on, was it this rule or that rule? What are they going for?
What? None of this makes any sense. But
Yeah, as far as for the AGM, that's about it, really. Milden Hall is dropping out of the National League. I'm not entirely sure why, though.
Apparently it's to do with club ownership. Somebody's just running the club themselves and they're taking a step back to reassess everything so they can put on a better experience for fans. Or at least that's what I've got from the statement that I've read.
At least it's not financial, the issue. But...
Apparently there's one sole owner now instead of like 3, but the others are willing to give financial backing if necessary.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think
Pretty much what I got from that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Mm-hmm.
It all comes down now to team selections, what riders pick for which clubs. Sheffield has already done. Their side is top heavy as fuck.
That team's been signed for months. They knew the points limit for months. That team's been signed for months. I'm sorry. This is going to be controversial and I'm going to be hated by Sheffield fans, but I don't care.
I'm actually wondering now if the points limit has changed. I'm thinking about it. I don't think it has.
Sheffield have got a full team and I don't even know what the fuck is going on with my teams.
Yep.
That team's been signed for months. Although, to be fair, it's not supposed to happen, but promoters talk to riders about the next season in August.
Has to get in early.
It happens all the time. It literally happens all the time. Certain rider who shall not be named. Wait. No, I can't say that. Never mind. Forget I said that because I'm just going to get in trouble if I say that. But, yeah. I think that's it, unless there's anything else.
Yeah. No, I think that's it as well. I'm just trying to find this rule I can't find. Ambulance cover. Go back to the table of contents.
The one thing that makes me think, oh no, is the restriction on the extra league riders, because clubs with more of a budget are going to be able to sign 3, like Sheffield, whereas clubs with a lower budget might not even be able to sign 1 unless a team sponsor paid for it, which was the case with Ipswich and Satford enough this season, just finished.
Well,
At
yeah,
least I think that's what I've heard.
Yeah, but the counter argument to that is that if you limit it to one or two riders per club, you're degrading the quality of the league anyway.
True.
So, what would you prefer? Would you prefer would you prefer an even field artificially created, but ultimately a more level competition, or would you prefer the dynamics of sport and money creating the league that you watch? What would you prefer from that?
I'm gonna go from an ice hockey point of view here, because this is how it goes in the league that Coventry are in. This happens all the time. So you get teams that have got like 7 times the budget, they get all the good players, and then all the little teams that have got not much budget whatsoever, who can only get like first year pros and seasoned vets and stuff, like that are about to retire. It creates a big gap between the top half and the bottom half of the league table. That's my only argument there, because you get one team that can't afford a big rider but can say, yeah, and then you get teams like Sheffield who have got 3. Are people going to go to a speedway track and watch their local team get beaten every week because they've got no decent riders, or they can't afford a decent rider?
That's the counter argument. I don't really know what the answer is, if I'm honest. Because this is the thing. I think back to 2017, you had, there were still top riders riding in the British leagues in the Premiership, but then they introduced a rule that said only one 8-point rider per club. Suddenly, Doyle was out of Swindon, Lindgren was out of Wolverhampton. Lindgren never came back to the Premiership. Doyle was signed by Somerset.
True.
So I look at it.
There's arguments for both sides.
Yeah, I look at it that side and think that the 8-point rule did more harm than good. So I don't really see how a similar rule, except this time based on what other leagues the riders racing in, would do any better.
Let's get the fans involved in this one. Okay, so anybody who's watching on YouTube, drop a comment in the bottom and in the comments on what your opinion is on this. And anybody listening on the streaming services, contact us on Facebook or email us, because I'm interested to know people's opinions on this.
That'll be interesting.
I'm interested to know people's opinions on this. So don't hesitate to get involved, because, yeah, why not? Let's create some discussion.
Well, discussion is all the AGM creates.
Well, also true, but, hopefully it'd be some positive discussion. That's what I'm trying to encourage.
Yeah, not flame wars.
Yeah.
But that's it for the AGM. All that's left is team building, and whenever the rulebook gets published, all the technical changes in that.
Yeah. Although, no doubt, when respective teams are being built, we'll post about it on social medias and things. It'll get posted on social media, and no doubt the admins for the Facebook page, i.e. us, will be posting about respective clubs and stuff. But other than that, I don't, this is the last communication we're going to have before we pack up for season 2 next year. So Is there anything you want to say before we stop? Wrap
No,
up?
I've said it all. I think I've said it all.
Fair enough. Wrap up then. Thanks everybody for tuning in to season 1 of Drop the Clutch. We appreciate everybody's support that we've had so far and all the people that have helped us out this year. Not naming names or anything, but we appreciate that as well. And Frankie, who came on like literally last minute, threw him in at the deep end. I've got to say he's done a pretty good job with all this podcast stuff so far. So thanks to everybody. And that's it for season 1. We'll catch you in February 2024. Have a good Christmas. Have a good New Year, catch you next season.
Goodbye.
You've just finished listening to another episode of the Drop the Clutch podcast. Thanks for listening. We appreciate the support. Have a good week and we'll catch you on the next one.